All right, in this explainer, we're going to tackle one of the most powerful stories in our culture. You know the one, the self-made billionaire. It's a story we've all heard a million times. But the source we're breaking down today, it argues that whole idea is, well, basically a myth.
And yeah, the source really doesn't pull any punches. I mean, it kicks things off with this incredibly bold claim. It says that self-made billionaires are a myth, just like unicorns. Not just rare, but a complete fantasy. And that's really the core idea we're going to unpack here.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about the idea that this source is pushing back against. And it's a big one. It's tied right into the very fabric of the American dream.
You know the story, right? It's that idea that anyone, and I mean anyone, can claw their way to the very top with just their own grit and a little bit of elbow grease. And the source points out that this is a really comforting idea, especially right now with wealth inequality being what it is. It's what keeps that dream alive for so many of us.
So, this is where the source really starts to peel back the layers on this myth. It does that by taking a much closer look at the actual origin stories of some of the world's richest people.
I mean, we can all picture it, can't we? The classic archetype. The brilliant innovator tinkering away in a garage. The lone genius who defies all the odds. It's a really powerful story. It really sells this idea of pure individual courage. But how true is it really? That's what the source asks.
Well, this is where the source contrasts that classic story with a few specific examples. For instance, it claims Jeff Bezos' famous garage start wasn't exactly from scratch. It was actually funded by a $250,000 investment from his parents. Then you've got Bill Gates, whose mother's business connections, according to the source, were a huge help in getting Microsoft that crucial early deal with IBM. And it also brings up reports that Elon Musk's family wasn't starting from zero either, having reportedly owned shares in an emerald mine. So the big point the source is making with all this is that these aren't really rags to riches stories. The argument is they're more like riches to even more riches stories. These folks didn't start with nothing. They had, a pretty significant head start, financial backing, social connections, a safety net that made all that risk-taking a whole lot less risky. Okay, so the argument doesn't just stop with their family backgrounds. It actually gets bigger and starts looking at the system itself, specifically the tax system. And this leads the source to ask a pretty direct question. Okay, fine, but do they at least pay their fair share of taxes along the way? This really shifts the conversation from just how these fortunes start to how they grow and are maintained. It's a challenge to that idea that they're built in some kind of vacuum. And the answer the source provides is, well, it's pretty stark. It's just the number 0. This is used to make a really dramatic point, that some of the wealthiest people in the country have apparently paid nothing in federal income taxes in certain years. And yeah, we're talking about totally legal means. Now, to back this up, the source actually names names. By listing these really famous billionaires, the argument it's making is that this isn't just a one-off thing. It's a feature of the system, a system that, according to them, benefits the ultra-wealthy. And who picks up the tab? Well, the argument is other taxpayers do.
And believe it or not, the argument goes even deeper than that. The source claims it's not just about the taxes they don't pay, but also about the benefits they do get. It says that the huge corporations these billionaires own often get direct government subsidies. So it's kind of a two-way street, a flow of wealth from the public right to the top.
So what's the usual defense for this kind of massive wealth accumulation? Well, the source gets into that next, and it's an idea you've probably heard before: trickle-down economics.
And this chart is pretty much the source's counter-argument in a nutshell. What it's showing, based on their data, is that in 2018, and this is for the first time in history, the 400 richest families in the US actually paid a lower overall tax rate than middle-class families. It's a direct challenge to the whole idea of a progressive tax system.
And to really drive home this point about just how fast wealth can accumulate at the top, the source points to this just staggering figure. It claims that during the first 2 years of the pandemic, a time of really widespread economic pain for so many, U.S. billionaires saw their collective fortunes grow by $2 trillion. The suggestion here is that the system doesn't just create wealth, it supercharges it at the top, especially during a crisis.
But it's not all about the tax system. The argument also dives into labor practices. The source makes the claim that paying low wages and, in some cases, having pretty rough working conditions are other key ways these massive fortunes get built, essentially on the backs of their workers.
This quote right here really captures the source's whole vibe on the trickle-down argument. It says they want to have their cake, and everyone else's cake, and eat it too. It's basically framing the push for tax breaks not as a way to help everybody, but as a way to grab an even bigger slice of the economic pie.
So all of this brings us to the source's big conclusion. If it's not just grit and genius, then what really creates a billionaire?
Well, instead of that romantic idea of grit and elbow grease, the source lays out what it calls the real ingredients. It argues that the actual recipe for a billion-dollar fortune is a mix of things like systemic inequality, inherited wealth, labor exploitation, tax loopholes, and government subsidies.
And here it is, the core takeaway from the source's entire argument. It concludes that the whole self-made myth is more than just a nice story. It's a dangerous distraction. The real story, it says, isn't about rugged individuals. It's about policy failures and a system that's set up to reward wealth over work.
And we're going to end on that thought. Because by shifting the focus from the individual to the system, the source really challenges us to think differently, not just about billionaires, but about the American dream itself. It leaves us with a pretty big question. If fortunes are made by policy, what does that mean for the American dream?